Hi, Mr. Carney.
Hi, Vashi.
Good to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be back. I'm surprised you had me back. I'm
There's
thrilled
nothing to be
here.
surprised about. I do want to start off on the state of the economy right now, and in particular, something that you have a lot of familiarity with, and that is interest rates. Is it your anticipation that the key lending rate will start to be cut this year?
In a word, yes, but maybe I provide a bit of context if I could to that. I think, whether it's Canada or the rest of the world, this is the first year of the post-pandemic economy, by which I mean, obviously in 2020 and 2021, we were living directly with the pandemic, and then we had the aftershocks of the pandemic, and one of those impacts is one of the big drivers of inflation. Now we're starting to get out of that. If you look at the situation of the Canadian economy, and I'm going to quote the Bank of Canada, their comments this week, they think our economy is operating a little bit below its potential, which means that over time that will continue to reduce the pace of inflation. That opens up the prospect that their policy, the level of interest rates, which they judge as restrictive, I agree, that they can start to loosen that policy for what it's worth, and it isn't worth anything really because I'm not the governor anymore, I don't get a vote. I would expect it would probably be something around the middle of this year, assuming things unfold as the bank expects, and then there would be subsequent rate cuts following that.
Is there a risk of waiting too long and a so-called hard landing, given, for example, the number of Canadians who will face mortgage renewals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is always a risk. There's risks on both sides. Inflation could be stronger, or the bank could wait too long, or other factors could intervene. But without question, one of the big factors is, yes, Canadians have big mortgage renewals. A number of them have already had their mortgages renewed and substantially higher interest payments. That restricts the economy. It restricts what they can do. They feel the pain, and the bank takes that into account. So that's one of the reasons why interest rates are a bit lower in Canada than they are in the United States. It's one of the reasons why I'm more confident on the timing of maybe of when the Bank of Canada would begin to cut rates than when the Federal Reserve would.
You mentioned sort of the shocks to the system that the pandemic provided, and one of them on the inflation side, of course, is around supply.
Yeah.
We have been very focused on those supply shocks as we talk about inflation over the past 18 months, but the conversation in this country more recently has shifted to one issue on the demand side, and in particular, immigration policy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There have been a number of economists musing lately about the relative capacity of the economy to absorb the level of immigration, which is very different than even a few years ago when immigration was seen as the key driver of our economy. Are you worried about the absorptive capacity of the economy at the current level of immigration? Okay,
so the first thing I'd say is that immigration, so new workers coming into Canada, the track record is great. It's it's a testament to Canadians and our institutions that we welcome new immigrants, they get integrated into the economy, they become productive, they become Canadians, and they move forward. Now, there's a difference, and as you know, part of the big surge in people coming into Canada has been students, post-secondary students. And post-secondary students, most of them, what they're supposed to do is study. They might have a job on the side, but they're studying. And so there's a demand for goods and services, housing, the most obvious example, but they're not necessarily increasing yet the productive capacity of the economy, and that's where you get those frictions. So what we've seen is that big surge in post-secondary students, student visas, and that's something I think the immigration minister began to act on this week.
Do you think while they are focused on increasing supply, and while we wait for the policies that have been introduced so far to take effect, the government might be forced to be more restrictive on its immigration policy, or would you advise against that?
Well, I think
beyond what's
our policy, beyond what's done, I think our policy of welcoming immigrants who integrate into the labor force, make us stronger, that works. And in my judgment, we can keep with that core policy. It's part of the essence of Canada, but also just, I hate to do it, but you're asking me as an economist, it is effective and in fact, most of the growth we've had in Canada in recent years has come from the growth in labor supply, including adding to our overall level of activity in the economy. So that's a net good thing. Where we've gone off course is in the scale of post-secondary students, in my judgment. So yes, you can always get better, you can always be more targeted, but broad brush, I think our policies worked. and the adjustments that starting to be made are putting us on the right track.
The discussion around immigration right now and its intersection with housing policy is very much focused on what so many Canadians are confronting, which is a real challenge with affordability,
Yeah.
a cost of living crisis. The opposition has very successfully tied the government's climate policy, and in particular their price on carbon or their carbon tax, to the issue of affordability. Why do you think, despite the rebate that's in place, the government has failed to convince a majority of Canadians, if the polls are accurate, that it is sound policy and worth it?
Well, you're asking me a question in terms of positioning and the actual policy. I mean, when you get the rebate, you and I both get the rebate. Everyone watching gets the rebate. 70% or so of Canadians get more in their rebate than they pay in their tax in the price on carbon. It's hard to track the second aspect, and with the first aspect, when you get the rebate, even when I first got the rebate, I looked at it and thought, I wonder if that's the carbon rebate, and it turns out it was. So look, it's partly on positioning. I don't think it's been as communicated. I mean, here's a real insight. It has not been communicated as well as it should have been. And the fact is, let me flip it around. If we took away the price on pollution, more than two-thirds of Canadians would be worse off. They would receive less than, they get the price off on the carbon they're spending, but they would receive less in terms of the transfer. And I think very few people understand that. It is not apparent that the Leader of the Opposition even understands that, or certainly his rhetoric is totally inconsistent with that.
But his rhetoric appears to have resonated with Canadians.
Well, look, Canadians respond to facts, and we need to get the facts in front of Canadians and let Canadians make those decisions. But climate policy and making Canada a better economy, a more efficient economy, more sustainable economy, those are all aligned. And it is about much more than just the price on pollution, the carbon tax. It's about what's happening in the auto sector. It's about whether how quickly we move to a clean grid. And it's very importantly, and this is an area I think, to go back to housing, we need to double, triple, quadruple down on, which is to help Canadians have better housing. Not just new Canadians, not just the new houses we're building, but the efficiency of those houses, because it's tangible, it goes directly to them. It's going to lower their heating bills and cooling bills in the summer, because after living through the summer we just had, we know how important that is. So we need to focus on those issues at the same time as the more broad-based structural things such as the carbon price.
Can you do stuff like that? And I'm thinking, for example, of the heat pump subsidies that were kind of brought in at the same time as this carbon tax carve-out, which ended up being this huge political issue. Are you able to do the kinds of things you're talking about, have a serious policy towards climate without a price on carbon?
It's one of the most effective instruments, but it is very much a world of and I think you have to have multiple elements, including, very importantly, and this is fundamentally true in Canada, but it's true around the world, you need to deliver for people today at the same time as we're making these investments. And we're beginning as a country to make huge investments for the medium and long term, which is going to make us more competitive. Think of the auto sector, think of clean energy, think of what's beginning to happen in the Canadian nuclear sector, world-leading sector that is being revitalized and is going to make a huge difference to this country around the world. That's all very interesting, but Canadians are worried about their wages, they're worried about their jobs, and they're being squeezed by the mortgage rates, the cost of rent, the cost of housing, and so they need to see tangible returns today, or at least the prospect of that. And in and around housing is one of the ways we can do it.
You talked about governing and making choices. Last November, you told the Globe and Mail that you hadn't ruled out a run for the Liberal leadership. Is that still the case?
Well, there is. It's easy not to rule out something that doesn't exist. So we're in the hypothetical of hypothetical.
Well, it's hypothetical, but you know, and I'll be blunt with you. You know as well as anyone, we're in Ottawa right now. I'm not sure if everyone across the country is discussing the potential for who's going to run where, but in Ottawa, it continues to be something that is constantly discussed, and you have yet to say no, it's not going to happen.
Well, first thing.
Not to say that you should. I'm just asking.
I hope I have a few years left in in me. But let's be clear about the near term. We've been rightly talking about issues of the medium term, but the near term, the Prime Minister is going to be the leader of the Liberal Party in the next election, and that's clear.
You believe that to be the case?
Absolutely, and I support him. And the issue for Canadians, which is why you focused on them, is the here and now. How do we get on top of the cost of living? What's going to deliver today, and what's going to deliver in the medium term? And so we've talked about investments and what the government can do in housing, rightly so, how it links back into decarbonization. I want to add one other thing, which I think we should spend much more time on as a country, which is the competition, the degree of competition in our major industries. So whether we look at on the telco side, whether we look at new entrants in financial services, across in the grocery sector, in the retail sector, we pay as a whole higher proportions of the price of those services than most other major economies. And it's not just down to geography, it's down to competition. And I think those are some of the issues. We Canadians are hurting. We understand cost of living. The bank is getting on top of inflation. I'm confident that they will get on top of it and get in the right direction. But that will still mean prices are high.
We're familiar.
Yeah, we're all familiar.
Yeah.
There's inflation, and then there's the level of prices. And so the question becomes, but what else are we doing to help become more productive, more efficient, squeeze out those prices, today and tomorrow? And a big part of that is having more competition.
You obviously have a lot of ideas about the kinds of policies the federal government could pursue. Would you ever entertain a position, since you are convinced the Prime Minister will lead the Liberals into the next election, as a cabinet minister?
Well, look, you don't just hand out positions as cabinet ministers, but you do hand out gratuitous advice, which is what I've been doing. Look, I care. This is my country. I care deeply about it. I've had the honor of serving in roles here, both in the public service and as governor. And this is a time of consequence. These are big issues we've been touching on, the reshaping of the global economy, where Canada is going, how we deliver for Canadians today and tomorrow. And there's various ways to contribute to that, and I always look for opportunities to do that.
I didn't hear a no there for sure.
You heard a lot of words.
I heard a lot of words that weren't a no. Mr. Carney, I'll leave it there. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you.